two top astronomers suddenly detected a signal coming from an alien civilization. Without waiting for any instructions, Catherine responded to the signal by sending back a piece of music. Only afterward did she call the government to report the incident. Catherine thought this would bring her fame and fortune, but instead, she was met with harsh criticism from high-ranking officials. The officials grilled Catherine about every detail of her response to the signal. Catherine explained that she had merely encoded a simple piece of music at a rate of 125 pulses per second and sent it out. She believed that music was a universal language and wouldn't cause any harm, but the officials couldn't help but worry about what consequences this action might have for Earth. Some even suggested treating the unknown signal as a threat, but this was far from just a threat, it was a catastrophe. That night, the observatory where Catherine worked detected about 2,500 unidentified objects appearing around Earth's atmosphere, and they were approaching the planet at a speed of 1,000 kilometers per second. In an instant, houses began to shake violently. The boy thought it was an earthquake, called his mom and ran outside. Within seconds, the unidentified objects had pierced the atmosphere and were hovering overhead. At the same time, a blind girl named Emily eerily raised her hands in the air, terrifying her mother, Sarah, who quickly pulled her back inside the house. According to the monitors, the unknown objects were only 10 seconds away from impacting Earth. With no time to prepare, humanity could only count down the seconds in their minds. The moment the objects hit, massive explosions occurred, and most regions around the world faced similar attacks. Colonel Mulcroney ordered the affected areas to report updates every 10 minutes. The government declared a state of emergency. Schools were closed, and all civilian flights were grounded. Some powerful officials, anticipating the worst, had already taken their families to hide in bunkers. To uncover the truth behind the unidentified objects, humans dispatched a team to the landing site, where they found no signs of nuclear radiation, and tests for chemical or biological weapons came back negative. But strangely, a strong electromagnetic field was detected emanating from a spherical object, and 4 unknown substances were discovered on its surface. At first, Catherine speculated that these objects were perhaps alien probes and posed no real danger, but Mulcroney thought otherwise. Not only were there too many of them, but they had all targeted densely populated areas. Hearing this, Catherine became deeply concerned. She quickly called her sister Sophia to check if she was safe. As soon as Sophia picked up, Catherine urged her to take shelter at the observatory where she worked. Hearing the urgency in her sister's voice, Sophia hurriedly packed her things and prepared to leave. Meanwhile, in the UK, Jonathan called his wife Sarah, telling her to take shelter at her father's place. He promised to return from Britain to France to reunite with them. Only Bill the biologist didn't leave. He planned to go back to his office and research these alien objects, determined to figure out what they were. After learning that the spheres were emitting some kind of electromagnetic field, Bill picked up the phone and asked a friend to send him some retinal stimulation research data, and it was this data that led him to a shocking discovery. Bill immediately called his son Dan, who was involved in military research. He explained that the magnetic fields being emitted by the spheres were identical to the pulses they had been studying to stimulate brain neurons, same frequency, same amplitude. These fields could interfere with human neurological functions. It seemed the aliens had a deep understanding of human neuroscience. As the magnetic fields intensified, more neurons would be triggered, leading to brain hemorrhages, paralysis, and even death. To survive, humans needed to hide, preferably in secret locations with metal containers or deep underground. Dan quickly reported this information to the higher-ups. However, Rachel pointed out that this was just a theory. Without confirmation, they couldn't issue a government alert, or they risked triggering widespread panic. For now, they would have to wait for the scientists to finish their research. But Dan wasn't willing to just sit back. He secretly posted an emergency shelter alert on the government website, warning people to take cover before the aliens launched an attack. The message quickly spread, going viral across the globe. Chaos erupted as people frantically tried to escape. Jonathan hailed a cab to take him to the train station, planning to return to France and reunite with his wife, Sarah. He had to offer the driver a stack of cash before he reluctantly agreed to take him. Meanwhile, in France, Sarah was driving with their 2 children, heading to the designated meeting point with Jonathan. In the back seat, Tom looked up in terror and saw strange ripples forming in the sky. Some passers-by were curious and took pictures with their cell phones. Catherine explained that this phenomenon was caused by the electromagnetic field intensifying and disrupting the atmosphere. Catherine's sister, Sophia, was also on her way to the observatory, but the roads were gridlocked with cars, blocking her path. Anxious, Catherine called her sister, urging her to find shelter immediately, warning that the earth was about to come under attack. Before Catherine could finish her sentence, the phone signal dropped, and her computer screen started flickering. When Sophia stepped out of the car and looked into the distance, she was horrified to find that the headlights of the cars in the distance were strangely going out in her direction. Realizing the danger, Sophia began running in the opposite direction as fast as she could. Jonathan, on his way to the train station, got into a crash and plunged into the water. In the instant that the lights went out, Mokrani pulled Catherine into an underground bunker. Sarah, with her 2 children, rushed into the subway station. Bill took refuge in an elevator shaft with his ex-wife, Helen, but when the survivors finally emerged back to the surface, they were horrified to find that everyone who hadn't taken shelter in time was dead. After the incident, Catherine lied to the guard soldiers, claiming she was going out to check the satellite, but in reality, she was searching for her sister. Before everything happened, she had called her sister, Sophia, telling her to take shelter at the observatory where she worked, but there had been no sign of Sophia. As soon as Catherine reached the foot of the mountain, she saw 4 scientists, who worked with her at the observatory, dead in their car. The road was lined with abandoned cars and human corpses. Catherine called out her sister's name several times, but got no response. She hadn't walked far when she spotted Sophia's little red car, pressing her face against the window. She checked carefully, but Sophia wasn't inside. Just as she turned around, Catherine saw a familiar figure lying on the ground. Her heart broke. Could her sister really be dead? But when Catherine flipped the body over, her grief turned into relief. It wasn't Sophia, just someone who looked remarkably similar. Catherine finally let out a sigh of relief. She continued down the mountain, resuming her search. Suddenly, she heard a cry for help from the ravine below. After some hesitation, Catherine decided to take a chance and investigate. As soon as she entered, she found a little girl, abandoned. Through their conversation, Catherine learned that the girl had been separated from her parents, and her parents might already be dead. Feeling sorry for the child, Catherine decided to take her along. They were only about a kilometer away from the city. Just then, several soldiers rushed up and covered Catherine's and the girl's mouths and noses. Catherine turned around and saw it was Mokrani. After realizing that Catherine had left the observatory, Mokrani, concerned for her safety, had brought a few soldiers to track her down. Mokrani had intended to bring them directly back to the observatory, but Catherine insisted on finding her sister, Sophia. Luckily, Mokrani was also curious to see what the city looked like after the alien attack, so he agreed to accompany her. Before leaving, Mokrani sternly warned Catherine to follow his orders. Through a telescope, they spotted a few survivors looting a supermarket, and Catherine speculated that her sister might be among them. But when the group arrived at the supermarket, there wasn't a single survivor in sight, just a lot of blood on the ground. Mokrani took one of the soldiers to follow the trail of blood, while the others stayed put. The blood led them to a warehouse, and as they stepped inside, they were horrified to find that the survivors they had seen earlier had all been slaughtered. Then, gunfire erupted outside, and one of the soldiers was instantly shot in the head. They turned toward the rooftop and spotted an unidentified creature. The soldiers opened fire, the rapid gunshots echoing through the air. Catherine and the girls break away from the group and hide in the supermarket. When Mokrani returned from the warehouse, he witnessed 2 more of his soldiers get shot. They had been firing for a while before realizing they were shooting at nothing but air. Mokrani ordered his men to conserve their ammunition, but that's when Mokrani noticed that Catherine and the girl were gone. As they ran, Catherine tripped and got separated from the girl. When she turned around, she saw a strange figure lurking behind one of the shelves. Luckily, Mokrani and his men burst in, opening fire and killing the creature. When Catherine got back on her feet, she realized the girl was nowhere to be found. The girl had hidden inside a refrigerator. Just as she closed the lid, one of the alien creatures spotted her. The little girl thought she was too smart to be discovered, but the alien creature passed her by in a flash, and the girl was too scared to breathe. She thought she was safe, but to her horror, the creature found her after all. The lid slowly opened, and the next second, her scream pierced the air. Mokrani and his team searched the area, and one of the soldiers found the girl inside the fridge, but she had been shot in the head and was already dead. Since arriving at the supermarket, more and more people had been killed, but they hadn't even gotten a clear look at the alien creature's forms. Seeing the girl's tragic death, Catherine was overcome with grief. After this incident, Mokrani decided they needed to return to the observatory immediately. One of the soldiers was shot in the neck and had to walk back with the help of his teammates. As soon as they returned, they began treating the injured soldier. Not long after, Mokrani approached Catherine with grim news. The soldier had died from blood loss. Catherine was filled with guilt. If she hadn't insisted on leaving the observatory to find her sister, none of these tragedies would have happened. Mokrani tried to console Catherine, telling her it wasn't her fault. He suspected that the aliens had been drawn to Earth by something specific. Just then, the radio crackled with an alien signal, stronger than anything they'd heard before. It sounded like a song. Catherine was struck with terror. This was the same music she had sent to the aliens. It was at that moment she realized the entire catastrophe had been triggered by her response, the music she had sent back. Overwhelmed by guilt, she locked herself in her room. Mokrani noticed something was off with Catherine and rushed over to check on her. Catherine didn't want to hide her mistake any longer.
Cette chanson, elle fait partie du message qu'on a envoyé dans l'espace. C'est moi qui l'ai choisi. C'est comme ça qu'ils nous ont trouvés. C'est de notre faute.
Meanwhile, Dr. Bill found his ex-wife, Helen, and before disaster struck, they had taken refuge in an elevator shaft. After the incident, Bill looks out the window and sees human corpses all over the street. Worried about their son Dan's safety, they packed their bags and grabbed some food, planning to head to the military base where Dan worked. But as soon as they arrived, something felt wrong. Countless soldiers lay dead, their heads pierced by sharp weapons, and the bunker door had been left wide open. It was clear that the base had been attacked by an unknown force before they got there. An hour earlier, Dan had lost contact with the other military bases. He suspected they had been hit by the alien creatures and reported the situation to Rachel. In response, the higher-ups sent 2 Special Forces soldiers to investigate. They were fully armed, wearing gas masks and equipped with the most advanced weapons. They thought they were prepared for anything, but as soon as the 2 soldiers stepped out of the bunker, they saw something resembling dog-like quadrupedal bots rushing toward them. In an instant, one of the soldiers was shot in the head. The other soldier, terrified by the sudden attack, turned and ran back to the bunker, pounding frantically on the door. The guards inside had no idea what was happening outside. The moment they opened the door, the alien creatures slipped inside. In a matter of seconds, the once impenetrable doomsday bunker was overrun. Now, Bill and Helen were searching the base for their son, Dan. As they entered the bunker, they found the hallways filled with the bodies of fallen soldiers. The scene was horrific, and they grew increasingly worried about Dan's fate. They called out Dan's name but got no response. Suddenly, they heard a loud noise behind a metal door, startling them. The banging was rhythmic, almost as if someone was desperately trying to call for help. Thinking it might be Dan trapped inside, they gathered their courage and decided to open the door, but as soon as they did, an unknown alien creature burst out. Bill accidentally tripped over a soldier's corpse. The quadrupedal bot quickly gained the upper hand, pinning Bill beneath it in a matter of seconds. Its head quickly fired an iron rod, coming dangerously close, just a bit closer, and it would pierce Bill's skull. At this rate, Bill would soon run out of strength. Just as things were about to take a deadly turn, Helen grabbed a submachine gun and fired at the quadrupedal bots. The intense recoil nearly knocked her off balance. Fortunately, the quadrupedal bots was killed on the spot, and they both breathed a sigh of relief. They soon discovered there were other survivors in the bunker. Through conversation, they learned that the woman was Dan's commanding officer. She had seen Dan leading a squad out of the bunker during the attack. There was still a glimmer of hope that Dan might be alive. Hearing this, Bill and Helen finally felt some relief. However, Rachel was devastated. Her 2 children had tragically died in the crisis. Before the alien attack began, Rachel had taken her 2 children into the bunker, thinking they would be safe from the crisis. She never expected disaster to strike so quickly. Rachel tearfully begged Bill to help her bury her children. Bill picked up a shovel and dug a small grave outside the bunker, but when he returned to take the children's bodies, he noticed Rachel now holding a gun. She asked Bill and Helen to bury her with her children. Helen wanted to refuse, but as a mother herself, she could deeply understand Rachel's pain. Perhaps this was the best outcome. After burying Rachel and her 2 children, Bill turned his attention to dissecting the quadrupedal bots. He made a shocking discovery. Inside was a mass of slimy tissue. It turned out the quadrupedal bots were flesh and blood creatures, much like humans. Bill examined the organism for a long time but couldn't figure out how it controlled the robotic exoskeleton to attack humans. It wasn't until he touched the spherical object within the slimy tissue that the quadrupedal bot's leg immediately lifted. The strange sight startled Bill. He thought the quadrupedal bots had come back to life. but the moment Bill stopped touching the node, the leg dropped back down. With his extensive knowledge of biology, Bill speculated that the organism inside was organic and had some kind of nervous system. Yet, from its outward appearance, it seemed these quadrupedal bots were the lowest-tier creatures in this alien civilization. Bill couldn't help but worry what would happen if the more advanced beings of this alien race set foot on Earth. Meanwhile, Sarah and her 2 children had taken shelter in the subway station, narrowly escaping the disaster. As they emerged, they saw the streets littered with corpses, a sight that terrified Tom. Although Emily was blind, she sensed the danger from the tension in her mother, Sarah. After comforting her daughter, Sarah prepared to drive to meet her husband, Jonathan. But as soon as she started the car, she realized it was dead. The crisis had not only caused power and internet outages, but even cars had stopped working. Left with no other option, they sought refuge in an abandoned hospital, where many other survivors had gathered. A nurse named Ash led them to the basement, where dozens of infants lay, the youngest just a few hours old. Ash regretfully told Sarah and the others that the baby's parents had all died in the crisis. He asked if they could stay for half a day to help care for the infants, promising someone else would relieve them afterward. Sarah was strongly opposed, but Emily begged her relentlessly. Though blind, Emily's heart was purer and kinder than most. Emily was also a key character in this story. She could often hear signals from the alien creatures, and this time the reaction was intense so much so that she struggled to breathe. That night, Emily was jolted awake by the strange signal once again. She sensed the source of the sound was nearby and, gathering her courage, went outside to investigate. It was at that moment that Emily, to her shock, realized her blind eyes could suddenly see. Overwhelmed with emotion, she burst into tears and immediately told her mother, Sarah. But before they could celebrate, they heard loud banging on the door outside. Sensing danger, Ash quickly urged everyone back into the basement, and he found 2 guns, agreeing with Carium to take turns keeping watch. But when Emily looked out the window, she saw countless quadrupedal bots had already surrounded the hospital. Downstairs, Carium, who was standing guard with his gun, hadn't noticed that the quadrupedal bots had already reached the entrance. While patrolling downstairs, Carium felt thirsty. He took a few gulps of water, and then he heard strange noises coming from the entrance. Without hesitation, Carium grabbed his gun and prepared to defend. That's when he saw an alien creature standing right in front of him, and there wasn't just one. Panicked, Carium quickly found a place to hide. The quadrupedal bots passed by him, and only after they moved away did he breathe a sigh of relief. Carium grabbed his bag and was about to flee in the opposite direction. He hesitated for a moment but then decided to wake up the others and escape together. Carium first woke up Sarah, telling her to rouse the others. Then, Carium went to the basement to find Ash but saw no sign of him. Seeing the dozen or so infants still there, Carium felt a pang of compassion, but he couldn't take them with him. Instead, he grabbed a stick and jammed the door shut from the inside. Before leaving, Carium also dragged a cabinet to block the entrance. At that moment, Ash was dozing off when he suddenly heard the cries of the babies. When he went out to check, he ran into Carium, who was holding a gun. After quickly understanding the situation, Ash decided he had to go save the children. Chaos had erupted in the hospital, with countless survivors being attacked by the quadrupedal bots. A woman, dragging her injured leg, fell off her hospital bed. She barely crawled a few feet before a quadrupedal bot pinned her down with a single claw, killing her instantly. As Ash rushed into the basement to save the babies, he came face to face with a quadrupedal bot. Luckily, Carium pulled him back just in time. Emily could sense the signals being emitted by the quadrupedal bots, and from the sound, she knew they were right ahead. Sure enough, before they got far, a quadrupedal bot emerged. They had no choice but to hide behind a cabinet. Emily gestured to her mother to stay silent. In an instant, the shadow of the quadrupedal bot appeared in front of them, its head peeking out, extending its weapons. If they stayed there any longer, the quadrupedal bot would surely find and kill them. In the nick of time, a baby's cry drew the quadrupedal bots away from them. After a long struggle, they finally escape from the hospital. But before they can get far, they hear a baby crying. Ash, unwilling to leave the babies behind, pleaded with Sarah and the others to come back with him to rescue them. When no one agreed, Ash decided he would go back alone. Carium grabbed Ash, telling him he was walking into a death trap. He suggested that they should wait until it was safe before returning. Sarah urged them to move quickly, saying there wasn't much time left. They had just left when the door to the basement, where the babies were, began to shake violently. Moments later, a quadrupedal bot entered. They had all expected the babies to be killed. However, when Ash and Carium returned, They were horrified to discover that the dozen or so babies had mysteriously vanished. The boy Sasha is mourning the loss of an elder when he suddenly hears a terrifying noise, growing louder and louder. As he steps out into the yard, he discovers a deep pit, with a strange sphere at its center. The noise is coming from inside, as if something is calling to him. It turns out that Sasha and Emily share a unique trait: they can both hear signals emitted by alien life forms. Ever since the crisis began, Catherine has been studying these signals, confirming that they originate from a fixed location. She believes that by tracking them, they might be able to find the aliens themselves. However, in order to pinpoint the exact source of the signal, they need reflectors to triangulate it. Mokrani quickly organizes a team to connect all the observatory's reflectors. After repeated scans and thorough investigations, Catherine manages to locate the source of the signal, pinpointing its exact coordinates. The location is in a nearby valley. To understand why the aliens are attacking Earth, Catherine asks Mokrani to lead a small team to investigate, insisting that she accompany them. Worried for her safety, Mokrani puts a bulletproof vest on Catherine. After leaving a few guards behind, they depart from the observatory. As they enter the forest, Mokrani orders everyone to stop. It seems like something is following them, yet they fail to notice the quadrupedal bots appearing up ahead. At that moment, Catherine touches her face and realizes it's covered in blood. In the blink of an eye, a soldier standing beside her is killed. They are under attack from the quadrupedal bots. At the critical moment, Catherine's legs seem to fail and she falls again. Seemingly in shock and unable to stand up with her head covered, Mokrani is forced to fight off the quadrupedal bots while also taking care of Catherine. By nightfall, they manage to escape the relentless pursuit, but the wounded soldier was already dying, screaming from the pain in his abdomen. Mokrani has no choice but to cover the soldier's mouth to prevent drawing more quadrupedal bots. Seeing this, Catherine breaks down emotionally, suggesting they immediately return to the observatory. Hearing this, Mokrani nearly loses his temper. Finding the aliens was her idea, and now running away is also her idea. But having come this far, turning back isn't an option. When they finally reach the source of the signal, they find a crashed ship and a large field of wreckage. What had attacked them? Catherine is utterly confused. Then, she spots an organic substance among the debris, speculating that this might be the alien's true form, though now blown to pieces beyond recognition. As Catherine prepares to study it further, a terrifying noise echoes behind her. A quadrupedal bot suddenly appears at her back, but it doesn't attack her. Instead, it walks off in another direction. At this moment, the quadrupedal bots were spinning around like headless flies, seemingly unable to see Catherine and the others. Mokrani speculated whether the quadrupedal bots had been damaged during the crash, but it was just a guess. Following behind the quadrupedal bots, they discovered a slightly more intact organic body, though its surface was so badly burned that its specific form was unrecognizable. And just then, a couple of soldiers caught a quadrupedal bots. Meanwhile, a 3-month pregnant woman was tragically discovered by another quadrupedal bot. After being dragged for tens of meters, she was brutally killed in a nearby river, and the fetus in her womb was savagely ripped out. Why were the quadrupedal bots so fixated on human offspring? What was their purpose? To find out, Bill began studying the corpse of the quadrupedal bot. On its head, he discovered a strange circular ring. From its structure, it looked like some kind of reflector or perhaps a scanner. Bill looked into the light and was horrified to find something inside. He placed it under a microscope, magnifying it 1,000 times, and saw that it was covered in thousands of bizarre lines. Bill speculated that the quadrupedal bots were scanning human genes, though their ultimate goal remained unclear. After locating the source of the alien signal, Mokrani and the others returned to the observatory. As soon as they arrived, they noticed a woman. When Catherine got a clear look at the woman's face, she was overjoyed. It was her sister, Sophia. It turned out that before the crisis, Sophia had hidden in a cave. When she finally returned, she found that everyone along the road was dead. On her way to the observatory, Sophia came across an RV. She planned to scavenge some food, but instead, she unexpectedly saved a boy named Theo. Along the way, they were also attacked by the quadrupedal bots. In a moment of desperation, Sophia shoved Theo into a cable car and told him to stay quiet while she ran out to distract the quadrupedal bots. As the quadrupedal bots closed in, Sophia frantically climbed onto a nearby structure to avoid the attack. But just then, Theo called out from the cable car, attracting the quadrupedal bots back toward him. To protect Theo, Sophia shook the railing constantly, trying to lure the quadrupedal bots away. Then she heard a gunshot. It turned out that a woman had shot and killed the quadrupedal bot, saving Theo. Afterward, Ines took them to a hidden shelter, where a large group of survivors had gathered. However, food was scarce and medical supplies were running low. In gratitude for their help, Sophia promised to take Theo to the observatory where her sister worked, vowing to come back and rescue the others. Catherine didn't want her sister to break her promise, so she pleaded with Mokrani to help rescue the survivors. Mokrani, saying it was his duty, agreed without hesitation. Before setting off, Catherine made a bold guess about why the alien ship had crashed, suspecting it was related to the signal they had been tracking. In other words, the radio waves had interfered with their communication, causing the ship to crash into the mountains. Catherine called this phenomenon blinding. However, this theory still needed to be tested, so Catherine asked to accompany Mokrani on the rescue mission and bring along a radio wave disruptor, which could help confirm her hypothesis if they encountered the quadrupedal bots. Seeing Sophia return with help, Ines cried tears of joy. At last, there was hope for their survival. Mokrani ordered his men to distribute food and water to the survivors, planning to lead them back to the observatory in an hour. But at that moment, a soldier was attacked and killed on the spot by a quadrupedal bot. As they fled, Sophia was shot and fell to the ground, but fortunately, she was wearing a bulletproof vest. By the time Mokrani and Catherine arrived, they found a quadrupedal bot ready to execute Sophia. Catherine, in a frenzy, rushed to save her sister, nearly getting killed by the quadrupedal bot herself. In a panic, Sophia slowly moves to find cover. As she sat up, she realized there were 5 quadrupedal bots right in front of her. Though she was wearing a bulletproof vest, one of the quadrupedal bots shot her in the shoulder. At that moment, Catherine hurriedly opened her backpack, pulling out the radio wave emitter to test her hypothesis. Facing the relentless attack from the quadrupedal bots, Mokrani was no longer able to fight back. Desperately, he kept urging Catherine, giving her only 1 minute to complete her task. In the blink of an eye, another soldier was taken down, but after fiddling with the controls, she still couldn't find the correct frequency. One of the quadrupedal bots discovered the room where the survivors were hiding and began ramming the door repeatedly. Inside, the survivors, like terrified birds, didn't dare make a sound. Mokrani had almost run out of bullets, with only a handgun left. If this went on, they were all as good as dead. Now, all hope rested on Catherine, but finding the right signal wasn't something that could be done quickly. Catherine's heart raced as the pressure mounted. At this moment, the quadrupedal bots had already reached Sophia. One of them stopped, turned around, and prepared to kill her, extending the weapon from its head. Sophia helplessly looked toward her sister. Just then, they heard the sound of radio waves. Catherine had succeeded. As the sound waves emitted, the quadrupedal bots finally halted their attack. Catherine's guess was right. Catherine seized the opportunity to rush to her sister's side, and the two wept tears of joy. In the end, Mokrani and the others successfully evacuated the survivors to the observatory. After discovering that the quadrupedal bots were scanning human genes, Bill sought out Emily, hoping to get her help in making a breakthrough in his research on the quadrupedal bots. He remembered Emily once mentioned that she could feel the pain of the quadrupedal bots as they died. This suggested that Emily might have some sort of connection with the alien creatures. Bill wanted her to reveal everything she knew about the quadrupedal bots, in hopes of finding a way to destroy them all. But Emily was strongly opposed, asking what would make them any different from the quadrupedal bots if they did that. Emily and Bill ended up in a heated argument. What Bill didn't know was that there was another boy named Sasha, who shared the same ability as Emily. He too could hear the sounds emitted by the quadrupedal bots. Sasha had hidden himself in a warehouse, while Noah stayed behind to fight off the aliens, buying time for his son to escape. But when Noah arrived, Sasha cruelly locked him outside. Despite his father's desperate pleas, Sasha remained unmoved. Moments later, a quadrupedal bot appeared behind Noah. A gunshot rang out, and Noah was struck down, but the quadrupedal bots didn't want to leave him alone. It walked up to Noah and held out the weapon on its head. In his final moments, Noah looked toward his son, confused, and then Sasha thought no one would ever find out what happened. Little did he know that Jonathan, standing not far away, had seen everything. Afterwards, Sasha ran out, seeking help from Jonathan. At that time, Jonathan didn't know they were father and son. He had always assumed the man who had just died was Sasha's uncle. So why did Sasha hate his father so much? Not long ago, Jonathan had set out on foot to return to the UK to find his wife Sarah and their daughter, Emily. On the way, he was suddenly called to the bottom of the car by a woman named Chloe, who told Jonathan to keep quiet. A loud noise echoed from above, as if something terrifying was smashing into the car roof. They then saw an alien creature leap down. Though they couldn't see the full appearance of the alien, the sight of its 4 legs alone was enough to scare Jonathan senseless. From Chloe, Jonathan learned about the quadrupedal bots that were slaughtering survivors. In gratitude for Chloe's help, Jonathan decided to accompany her back to town to find her son, Sasha. Luckily, Sasha had been protected by his uncle and was still alive. But Chloe's father hadn't been so fortunate. Chloe picked up her father's sweater, breathing in the familiar scent. At that moment, Chloe's brother Noah walked in, and they quickly began to argue. It turned out that Chloe hated her brother for assaulting her while drunk. Sasha was actually the result of that horrific act. A dirty, incestuous secret Chloe had hoped would stay buried forever, but to her horror, Sasha overheard everything from the next room. His eyes instantly filled with a fierce hatred, and murderous thoughts consumed him. That night, Sasha quietly snuck into his uncle's room. He picked up the handgun lying by the bed, intending to kill him in his sleep. But just then, one of his uncle's friends entered the room, interrupting Sasha's plan. Not long after, they were attacked by the quadrupedal bots, and Sasha used the bots to kill his uncle. Chloe was relieved to see Sasha return unharmed. When she asked about Noah's whereabouts, Sasha lied, telling his mother that Noah had been killed by the quadrupedal bots while trying to save him. Knowing the truth about Noah's death, Jonathan chose to keep it hidden, not wanting to cause trouble for himself. Soon after, they arrived at a residential area. As they passed by a warehouse, Sasha felt as though something was calling to him. He then spotted a dead quadrupedal bot lying on the ground. Sasha seemed to sense something from inside the bot. Gathering his courage, he reached out to touch it. In that moment, Sasha had a vision. A girl's face appeared before his eyes. The girl was Emily, who shared the same unique ability as him. Sasha accidentally came across Jonathan's family photo and recognized the girl from his vision. When he asked Jonathan about it, he learned that she was Jonathan's daughter. Though Sasha was confused, he decided not to tell Chloe about it. Meanwhile, a quadrupedal bot catches a pregnant woman and drags her for 10 meters as it tries to scoop up her fetus. The excruciating pain from the long drag left the woman in agony, while her injured husband, far in the distance, frantically called out her name. The man fired several rounds at the quadrupedal bot, but his bullets didn't harm it at all. Instead, he only drew the bot's deadly attention. After dropping the woman, the quadrupedal bot began walking toward the man. At that moment, Sarah and Helen had just stepped out of a supermarket, carrying gifts, ready to celebrate Tom's birthday. They hadn't gone far when they heard the woman scream. Terrified, Helen drew her handgun, preparing to check out the situation. Following the sound, they looked down and were horrified to see a quadrupedal bot dragging the pregnant woman. As they rushed down, the quadrupedal bot was preparing to kill the woman's husband. They had no choice but to save the woman first. Seeing his wife escape before his death, the man finally breathed a sigh of relief. But before they got far, they heard the man's scream followed by the sound of a gunshot. They knew they had to flee quickly, or the quadrupedal bot would soon catch up. They helped the woman into a van. Since all the cars were disabled after the alien attack, Helen had to ask Sarah to push the van behind them while she took control of the steering and skidded down the driveway to escape. The van hadn't slid far when they saw the quadrupedal bots appear 2 levels below. As soon as they came face to face, they were attacked by the bots, but luckily Helen managed to dodge in time. In an instant, the quadrupedal bot got wedged into the front of the van, dragging it for several hundred meters before the vehicle came to a stop. Seeing that the quadrupedal bot was finally motionless, Helen's heart slowly calmed down, and she gasped for breath. But sadly, the pregnant woman had already died. It turned out that during their escape, the quadrupedal bot had struck the woman, who had been hiding in the back. Seeing the tragic deaths of 2 lives, Sarah was devastated. Covered in blood, they made it back to the shelter safely. It wasn't until Helen saw Bill that she completely broke down in tears. Although Bill didn't know exactly what had happened, he pulled Helen into his arms and gently comforted her. After calming down a bit, Sarah organized a birthday party for Tom, and they even brought back a cake. Seeing such a warm scene, Tom was overjoyed, blowing out the candles all at once and celebrating a unique 18th birthday. In the midst of his happiness, Tom noticed blood on the soccer ball Sarah had given him. It was only then that he realized his mother had almost lost her life trying to make his birthday special. At the same time, Sasha, trying to understand his connection to the aliens, quietly stole Jonathan's family photo while he slept. Staring at the image of Emily, Sasha thought long and hard, but he still couldn't figure out the reason behind it all. The next day, Jonathan noticed the family photo was missing and began to suspect Sasha. This led to a heated argument between the two. In the heat of the moment, Jonathan blurted out that he had seen Sasha cause his uncle's death. Hearing this, Chloe was terrified and unsure whether to believe it. Chloe sneaks into Sasha's room when he's not there and finds Jonathan's family photo in a book, and realizes that Jonathan may be telling the truth. At this moment, Sasha's mind was in turmoil, and to cover up the truth, he decided to kill Jonathan. Sasha attacked Jonathan from behind when he wasn't paying attention. Meanwhile, Emily seemed to hear something strange and frightening. As she stepped out of her room, a quadrupedal bot suddenly appeared in front of her. Seeing the dangerous creature, Emily's eyes widened in terror, but to her surprise, the quadrupedal bot didn't attack. Instead, it slowly approached and stopped right in front of her. Then, like a puppy, the quadrupedal bot tried to please Emily, signaling for her to pet its head. Confused by the scene, Emily nervously reached out and touched it. In the next instant, an image of Sasha flashed in her mind, but at that moment, a gunshot scared Emily out of her wits. It was Helen, who, afraid for Emily's safety, which quickly retaliated, shooting Helen in the shoulder. Before Helen could react, the quadrupedal bot fired another shot, taking her down. The quadrupedal bot was standing over Helen, ready to deliver the final blow. Emily clung to the bot's head, begging it to spare Helen. Helen, desperate to survive, grabbed the bot's lower jaw, struggling with all her strength, but the quadrupedal bot showed no mercy. It slowly extended its weapon, and then, Emily looked at Helen's dead body and was inconsolable. After killing Helen, the quadrupedal bot walked away, and Emily was powerless to stop it. When Bill arrived and saw Helen's body, he was stunned, standing frozen in place, lost in shock. Losing the love of his life left Bill devastated beyond words. He couldn't even cry, he could only hate himself for being too late. Bill stayed by Helen's side all night, and the next day, he and Ash buried her together. Helen's death left Emily drowning in guilt. She believed it was her fault, thinking she had somehow lured the quadrupedal bot, indirectly causing Helen's death. Meanwhile, Ash began to worry that if things continued like this, they might all end up dead. While Ash doesn't blame Emily, Sarah is furious to hear her daughter being talked about in such a way and warns Ash to stay away from her daughter. After wounding Jonathan, Sasha disappeared without a trace. Chloe asked Jonathan to help her find her son and, with a tone of doubt, questioned whether Jonathan had really seen Sasha kill his uncle. Jonathan nodded firmly. Hearing this, Chloe was devastated and confided in Jonathan the truth. Sasha was the child of her and her brother. Chloe explained that every time she looked into Sasha's eyes, she saw her brother's face, which made her feel sick. This was why she had always distanced herself from Sasha, trying to avoid him, but now that he was truly gone, she realized she couldn't bear to lose him. After hearing the truth, Jonathan was speechless, unable to believe that such a bizarre thing could exist in this world. What they didn't know was that, at that moment, Sasha was actually doing quite well. Hungry, he had found a junkyard and happily ate bread and drank soda, living it up. After finishing his meal and getting ready to take a nap, a quadrupedal bot suddenly appeared in front of him. Why had the quadrupedal bots found both Sasha and Emily at the same time? And why were they asking to be petted by them? Once inside the vision, Emily slowly opened her eyes. This time, they could see each other clearly, and their behavior was extremely intimate, almost like lovers. As soon as Emily rolled over, her belly was clearly and noticeably swollen, indicating that she was already pregnant. Sasha instinctively reached out to touch the child in Emily's womb. Seeing this, Emily was startled awake. Sasha was also taken aback, but they didn't know each other, and Emily was in the UK while Sasha was in France. The only explanation was that, at some point in the future, they would have a child together. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Chloe had reached the city in their search for Sasha. They found corpses of humans everywhere, but before they got far, they were spotted by a quadrupedal bot. The bot was lurking in the city, hunting down any surviving humans. Upon seeing Jonathan and Chloe, it immediately gave chase. Jonathan fired repeatedly at the quadrupedal bot, nearly tripping in his panic. With the bot closing in on them, they had no choice but to dive into a cold storage room to hide, accidentally dropping their weapon in the process. The room was filled with the stench of rotting pork, making it unbearable. Before they could catch their breath, they heard the footsteps of the quadrupedal bot just outside the door. It seemed to have found them. The bot began rattling the doorknob, trying to break in and kill them. Jonathan and Chloe rushed to stop them, pulling the door handle as hard as they could in the opposite direction. They didn't dare make a sound, but if things continued like this, the quadrupedal bots would break in sooner or later. Without weapons, they would be at its mercy. At the last second, gunshots rang out from outside. It was Sasha, who had picked up the dropped weapon and shot the quadrupedal bot from behind. Strangely, the quadrupedal bot didn't fight back. It was clear that the quadrupedal bots wouldn't attack Sasha, seemingly treating him as a friend. Sasha also seemed to sense the quadrupedal bot's goodwill toward him. Only when she heard Sasha calling her name did Chloe finally feel safe enough to open the door. Mother and son embraced each other tightly. Sasha kept apologizing, feeling guilty that his stubbornness had put his mother in danger. When Chloe asked why he had killed his uncle, Sasha admitted that he had overheard their conversation and didn't want his uncle to hurt her again. Hearing this, Chloe shook her head and let out a sigh of relief. Since the mistakes of the past couldn't be undone, they could only move forward and start fresh. She asked Sasha to forgive her for the coldness she had once shown him. They reconciled and became a normal mother and son. At this point, Sasha had his own plan. He decided to follow Jonathan to the UK to find Emily and uncover the truth behind everything. Meanwhile, Emily seemed to see something terrifying. A fierce quadrupedal bot appeared before her, but it acted as gentle as a pet dog. As soon as she petted its head, Emily was drawn into a strange vision. To her horror, she discovered that she was pregnant, and the father of the child was Sasha. Determined to find out the truth, Emily decided to follow the quadrupedal bot to its ship. Carium strongly opposed the idea, not wanting Emily to take such a dangerous risk. Emily firmly stated that if she didn't go, more people would die, and she felt as though the quadrupedal bots were seeking her help. They wanted to survive. It was hard to understand if this woman had lost her mind, showing sympathy for the same quadrupedal bots that had been slaughtering humans. Carium had no idea that his woman would soon bear another man's child. To protect the woman he loves, Carium begs Emily to take him with her, to avoid worrying her mother, Sarah. Emily left a note while Sarah slept. When Sarah awoke and saw the note, she realized that her daughter had gone off to find an alien ship. Sarah grabbed a gun, took Tom with her, and set out to track Emily down. But as soon as they reached the door, they heard gunfire outside. Sarah quickly shielded her son behind her. They prepared to leave through the basement, but before they got far, they were met by a group of people shining flashlights on them. They ordered Sarah to drop her gun. From their gear, it was clear they were heavily armed soldiers. Meanwhile, Emily and Carium had reached the street, guided by a quadrupedal bot that seemed to be showing them the way. The quadrupedal bot led them to a large bridge. As they looked below, they saw something resembling a submarine floating on the water, with a black hole at one end. After much thought, Emily decided to go down and investigate. Though the quadrupedal bot wouldn't harm her, it might kill Carium. Emily had no choice but to ask Carium to stay behind while she went on alone. As soon as Emily entered the interior of the submarine, she was greeted by a wide staircase. Looking further in, the entire space was circular, and on the surrounding framework were countless quadrupedal bots that had once attacked humans. Now, they stood quietly, as if in a state of dormancy. As she stood there, confused, a voice echoed from deep within, as though calling to her, summoning her courage. Emily followed the direction of the sound. After walking for a short distance, she came across a passage that was round on the outside but square in the center. The voice seemed to be coming from there. As Emily climbed over, she was horrified to discover that the dozen missing babies from the hospital were all there. Everything here was shrouded in mystery, and the only way to understand it was to keep going deeper. Soon, Emily came upon a long control panel with steps on either end. Could this be where the aliens were hiding? Emily cautiously observed her surroundings, and once she was sure there was no immediate danger, she stepped up onto the platform. The moment she stepped onto the control platform, she finally saw the aliens' true form and gasped in shock, breathing heavily. And with that, the first season of War of the Worlds came to an end. As for what the aliens looked like, their true purpose for coming to Earth, the connection between Emily, Sasha, and the aliens, and the fate of humanity, these questions will have to wait until the next season.